Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav and we'll be learning today Mirz Hashem Daf Kuf Lamed Hey Amid Aleph. We begin on the bottom of Kuf Lamed Dalet Amid Beis with a new Siman Tuf Reish Samach Hey. Esrig Aser Le'achol Bashvi. It is forbidden to eat the esrig on the seventh day of Sukkot on Hoshana Rabbah, even after you are already Mekayim the mitzvah of Dalin Minim on Hoshana Rabbah. And in reality, Hoshana Rabbah is the last day of Yom Tov, so you really don't need the esrig anymore. Still in all, it is forbidden to go ahead and eat the esrig. Says the Mechaber Sif Aleph, Esrig Bashvi'i Aser. The esrig is forbidden on the seventh day of Sukkot. Why? Sha'arei huktzah l'chol shiva. Because when you took the esrig before Yom Tov and you set it aside for use for the mitzvah, it became huktzah l'mitzvasai. It became set aside and dedicated for the mitzvah usage. And once that happens, it becomes forbidden for other usage. Specifically, we learned earlier that when you designate an item for a mitzvah, it becomes forbidden to use for its other primary use. So, for example, we learned earlier that an esrig, the primary use of an esrig, it's a fruit, the primary use is achila. Therefore, when you set it aside for mitzvah usage, you take it away from its primary use, you're maktzeh it. You take it away from its primary use, which is achila, and instead you set it aside for mitzvah use. By hadassim, we said the primary use of a hadas is lahariach, is to smell it for its pleasant aroma. So when you set aside the hadas for mitzvah use, you're maktzeh it from use of reach, and you're not allowed to smell it. So over here, the Mechaber is coming to tell me that this Isser remains in place for the entire day of the seventh day of Yom Tov, even after you were already Mekayim the mitzvah. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah is cut in Aleph. Esrig Bashvi, the esrig on the seventh day, afilu la'acher she'naseh by mitzvaseh, even after you were already Mekayim the mitzvah, and ostensibly you don't need the esrig anymore for mitzvah use because today was the last day of Chiyuv. Today was the seventh day of Sukkot. It's Hoshana Rabbah. Tomorrow is Shmini Atzeres. On Shmini Atzeres, we don't take the Daled Minim. We're going to have to discuss why that is, but we don't take the Daled Minim on Shmini Atzeres, and therefore, now it's really mutter. Right now, you would think you don't need it for the mitzvah anymore. Kamash Malan the Mechaber. Still in all, it's aser. Is cut and bays. What does that mean? Aser ba'achila. It's prohibited for eating. V'ayin la'el b'simin tuf reish dun gimel sif aleph u'b'sif cut and aleph. And that's where the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah discussed what I just mentioned previously, that when you're maktzeh it lemitzvasai, when you set it aside for mitzvah usage, you remove it from its real primary use, which in the case of an esrig would be la'achila. So the Mechaber said, esrig bashvi aser, why? Sha'arei huktzah l'chol shiva, because it was set aside for mitzvah use, for all 7 days of Yom Tov. You need the Daled Minim for all 7 days, so it was set aside for all 7 days of Yom Tov. Ois Katan Gimel L'chol Shiva, says the Mishnah Berurah, V'im Hifrishai L'yayim Echad. Let's say that wasn't the case. Let's say you had an esrig that you only set aside for use for 1 day. You know that you're getting a different esrig, let's say, on day 2. So you set aside this esrig for the first day of Yom Tov. You have no intention of using it for the rest of Yom Tov at all. Then Then that esrig would only be aser ba'achila for that day. After nightfall, at the end of that day, that esrig would become mutter ba'achila. Going back to the Mechaber on the bottom line of Kuf Lamed Dalet Amud Beis, continues the Mechaber says, Va'afilu nifsal achar she'asa by mitzvah. Even if the esrig becomes puzzle on Hoshana Rabbah after you finish davening. So you went ahead, you davened on Hoshana Rabbah, you used your Daled Minim, and now at the end of davening, somehow the esrig becomes puzzle. So now it would seem that there are 2 reasons to say that it's no longer huktzah l'mitzvasai. 1, you don't need it for the mitzvah anymore. You're already Mekayim the mitzvah on Hoshana Rabbah. You're done with the Daled Minim. Second of all, this esrog actually became puzzle, so it's not even usable for the mitzvah. Still, it all says the Mechaber, Va'afilu nifsa lachar she'asa by mitzvah, even if it becomes puzzle and invalidated for mitzvah use after you were Mekayim the mitzvah on Hoshana Rabbah, Aser kol shivas yamim, it remains Aser all 7 days. Continues the Mechaber, Ubishmini Atzeres mutter. However, on Shmini Atzeres, after Hoshana Rabbah, on the 8th day, on Shmini Atzeres, now the esrog is mutter ba'achila. However, ubechutz la'aretz, like for us in chutz la'aretz, she'osim shnei yamim tovim shel galuyos, where we have shnei yamim tovim shel galuyos because of sveika diyoma, then asar af b'shmini, then the esrog remains asar ba'achila even on Shmini Atzeres. Why is it asar on Shmini Atzeres? Because let's remember, because of sveika diyoma, we treat every day as a suffix. Maybe that is the actual day, or maybe it's really the previous day. So when we hit Shmini Atzeres, really, we have a Sveika Diyoma. Maybe today is Shmini Atzeres, right? Which is what we call it. We call it Shmini Atzeres. But maybe in reality, it's really the 7th day of Yom Tov. Now, if it's the 7th day of Yom Tov, well, in that case, the esrog should still be Huktzah L'Mitzvasai, because we learned that the Daled Minim are Huktzah L'Mitzvasai L'Chol Shiva, for all 7 days of Sukkot. Now, this is very, very fascinating. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah's Kat and Daled. Af Bashmini, in Chutz La'aretz, where we have Shtei Yamim Tovim Shel Galuyos, the esrog remains Asar Ba'achila Af Bashmini. Explains the Chavetz Chaim why, to suffix Shvi. Because we have to treat Shmini Atzeres as if it's a suffix, maybe it's really Hoshana Rabbah. Now, V'hine ataz he'elah. So first of all, the Mishnah Berurah says, V'hine ataz he'elah, the Taz suggests, De'im nifsal, if the esrog is puzzle on Shmini Atzeres. So now, you have a whole slew of reasons to be matir. First of all, the esrog is puzzle. Second of all, you certainly don't need it anymore for the mitzvah on Shmini Atzeres. And Sveika Diyoma could be today is really Shmini Atzeres, and there is no mitzvah of Daled Minim today at all. So you really have 3 reasons to be matir. Number 1, maybe today really is Shmini Atzeres. It's not Sukkot anymore. So how could the Daled Minim be Huktzah L'Mitzvasai? Second of all, you're certainly not going to use it. You are Mekayim the mitzvah on Hoshana Rabbah. You're certainly not using your Daled Minim on Shmini Atzeres. Third of all, the esrog is puzzle. So in that case, the Taz suggests De'im nifsal yesh lahakal b'shmini. Aval b'karban nesan l'chaylik alav. The Karban Nesan disagrees with the Taz. V'chein kasa b'chedusha haritva lahachmir, and the Ritva also writes that you should be machmir. Now, the thing that jumps out at you right away when you learn this halacha is, what did we just say? We just said that in Chutz La'aretz, you have to treat Shmini Atzeres because of Sveika Diyoma. Maybe it's Shmini Atzeres, maybe it's Hoshana Rabbah. Now, that's why many of us eat in the sukkah. That's the maskana of the Gemara in sukkah, right? That you eat in the sukkah at Shmini Atzeres. Why do you eat in the sukkah at Shmini Atzeres? Because Sveika Diyoma, like any other Sveika Diyoma that we always have, by Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galuyos, we don't know this day that we call Shmini Atzeres, is it really Shmini Atzeres or is it really Hoshana Rabbah? And if it's really Hoshana Rabbah, we have to eat in the sukkah. And that's why we eat in the sukkah. But that begs the question, why don't we take the Daled Minim? Nobody takes the Daled Minim on Shmini Atzeres and Chutz La'aretz. Why not? Why don't we say Sveika Diyoma? Maybe it's Hoshana Rabbah, and maybe we have to take the Daled Minim. The same way we eat in the sukkah because it's Sveika Diyoma. That maybe it's Hoshana Rabbah, it's really still sukkahs, and we have to eat in the sukkah. Now, the Rishonim ask this kasha. Taisus stuff Mem Zayin Amid Beis. Taisvis Mem Zayin Amid Beis in sukkah asks the kasha. Taisus says like this: Belulav, when it comes to the Daled Minim, lo ratzu l'saken klal sheyitlenu halulav misafik. The Chazal did not want to be misaken that we should take the Daled Minim on Shmini Atzeres because of Sveika Diyoma, maybe it's Hoshana Rabbah, the same way they said that we should eat in the sukkah. Why? Lefishahu Yom Tov. Because let's remember, Hoshana Rabbah is not Yom Tov. Hoshana Rabbah is Chol. But Shmini Atzeres is Yom Tov. Now, if let's say it really is Shmini Atzeres, right? In that case, the Daled Minim are muktzah. The Daled Minim are Eitzim Vavonim. So they're muktzah on Shmini Atzeres. So how are you taking a lulav and esrog on Shmini Atzeres? So if you're going to take the Daled Minim on Shmini Atzeres because of Sveika de Yoma, that maybe it's a Shana Rabbah, what you're doing is you're holding a lulav on esrog on Shmini Atzeres, and you're really making a declaration that today is Chayil. Why am I holding a lulav on esrog? Because it's a Shana Rabbah. Shana Rabbah is Chayil, but today is Shmini Atzeres. So on Shmini Atzeres, you're going to take a lulav and esrog and stand there and act as if it's Chayil? Taisa says you can't do that. Levishu Yomtiv u'muktzah l'tiltul. It would be if it really is Shmini Atzeres, that the dalaminim that you're holding now because of Sveika Diyoma are aser b'tiltul. They're muktzah. And then uminkar l'milsei shenoig by minik chayil. So by you holding them, it's very clear that you're acting as if today is a Shana Rabbah, which means that it's chayil. And you can't do that. You can't act on a Yom Tov day as if it's chayil because of Sveika Diyoma. That would be a zilzal in the Yom Tov. How about the sukkah? Why don't we say the same thing about a sukkah? Why don't we say, how could you eat in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres? You're acting as if it's a Shana Rabbah. You're acting as if it's chayil. Maybe it's a zilzal of Yom Tov. Excuse me. So Taisa says that that's not a concern. And the reason Taisa says it's not a concern is because Taisa says, Aval sukkah, pa'amim shesu kasai areva alav, and oichel ba'afil b'yomtiv. You have a sukkah out on your deck. Sometimes when the weather is pleasant, people go and they eat outside on the deck on a Shabbos afternoon or on a Sunday afternoon. It's not an integral stira to Yom Tov to eat outside in the sukkah. And also, just Taisus, according to what Taisus himself said, the problem by the lulav is that the lulav and the esrog would be muktzah. There's no iser of eating in the sukkah. So the sukkah is not a inherent contradiction to it being Yom Tov. And therefore, we want you to eat in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres because of Sveika Diyoma, that maybe it's a Shana Rabbah, but we don't want you to take the Daled Minim on Shmini Atzeres out of Sveika Diyoma, that maybe it's a Shana Rabbah. Now, that's a very nice explanation for why we do not take the Daled Minim on Shmini Atzeres, even though there's a Sveika Diyoma that maybe it's the seventh day of Sukkot, maybe it's a Shana Rabbah. But now that we've decided that we do not take the Daled Minim on Shmini Atzeres, right? Categorically, we do not take the Daled Minim on Shmini Atzeres. Well, then it comes again the question: why does the Mechaber say that in Chutz La'aretz, where we have Shnei Yamim Tovim Shel Golius and Shmini Atzeres is Sveika Diyoma, maybe it's a Shana Rabbah, the esrog is still Aser Ba'achila? Why is the esrog Aser Ba'achila? There's no way that I'm going to take the esrog today. Categorically, there's nobody who holds that you're going to use the esrog today. So why is it Aser Ba'achila? Why is it Huktzah L'Mitzvasai? Why does it remain Huktzah L'Mitzvasai? So this is a kasha also that the Mefarshim speak about. The primary answer that I've seen is that this was done as a siyug for the sukkah. We're kind of walking a tightrope. We keep the concept of Sveika Diyoma on Shmini Atzeres that we eat in the sukkah, and therefore we don't want to let go of the concept of Sveika Diyoma and say that the esrog should become mutter ba'achila because it's no longer huktzah l'mitzvasai, even though we're certainly not going to take the lulav and esrog. Okay, complex topic. Okay, so we saw here in the Mechaber that the esrog remains aser ba'achila on Hoshana Rabbah, even after you're already become the mitzvah of Daled Minim on Hoshana Rabbah. The esrog, the Daled Minim, they're still huktzah l'mitzvasai, and therefore the esrog is aser ba'achila even after you're become the mitzvah. Chutz La'aretz, where we have Shnei Yamim Tovim Shel Golius, the esrog remains aser ba'achila even on Shmini Atzeres because of Sveika Diyoma, maybe it's Hoshana Rabbah. Now continues the Mechaber, middle of the line, second line down, Kuf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, Umutter Batshi. But on the ninth day, on Simchas Torah, now already the esrog becomes mutter ba'achila. Now there's no tzad anymore to say on the esrog that it's huktzah l'mitzvasai. What are you worried about? Sveika Diyoma? If it's Sveika Diyoma, it's Shmini Atzeres. There's no mitzvah of Daled Minim on Shmini Atzeres. So now there's no longer any tzad to say that the esrog is huktzal mitzvasai, and now the esrog becomes mutter ba'achila. Continues the Mechaber, and the Mechaber says this is true. Va'afilu chal lihiyos be'echad b'Shabbos. Even if Simchas Torah is on a Sunday, still the esrog becomes mutter ba'achila on Simchas Torah. What does the fact that it's Sunday have to do with anything? The answer is because of a totally different halacha. The Mechaber just said that the esrog is aser ba'achila on Hoshana Rabbah. It remains aser ba'achila on Shmini Atzeres because of Sveikat Yoma. It becomes mutter ba'achila on Simchas Torah. So says the Mechaber like this. Let's say Simchas Torah is Sunday. If Simchas Torah is Sunday, that means Shmini Atzeres was Shabbos. On Shabbos, this esrog was aser ba'achila. Why? Because it's Shmini Atzeres, Sveikat Yoma. Maybe it's Hoshana Rabbah. Maybe it's really the seventh day of Sukkot. It's still huktzal mitzvasai. So it was aser on Shabbos, and now you're saying it's going to become mutter on Sunday. That sounds dangerously close to Hachana d'Rabbah. We know Hachana d'Rabbah, Ein Yom Tov Meichen l'Shabbos, Ein Shabbos Meichen l'Yom Tov. Now, if the esrog was aser ba'achila on Yom Tov of Shmini Atzeres, and now you tell and Shmini Atzeres was Shabbos, and now on Simchas Torah it's suddenly becoming mutter, so that looks like one day of Yom Tov and Shabbos, Shmini Atzeres that was Shabbos, was meichin. It prepared the esrog to be mutter ba'achila on Simchas Torah of Sunday. Is that a problem of Hachana d'Rabbah? And now maybe the esrog is aser? Says the Mechaber, no. The Mechaber, the first opinion says no. Va'afilu chal liyos be'echad b'Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah cotton hay. Va'afilu chal liyos v'lo yosvin alei mitam hachana. We're not going to aser the esrog ba'achila because of Hachana d'Rabbah. Kevich kfar hoya ba'olam. Why? Because it's not like a beya shenol to b'Yom Tov. Let's remember, if this was an egg, and the egg would have been laid on Shmini Atzeres of Shabbos, that egg would be aser ba'achila on Sunday, because it wasn't ba'olam, it wasn't in the world. It became available on Shmini Atzeres of Shabbos. Now you want to eat it on Simchas Torah Sunday? You can't. Ein Yom Tov Meichel Yom Tov, Ein Shabbos Meichel Yom Tov, Hachana d'Rabbah, it's aser. But over here, that's not the case with this esrog. This esrog was already ba'olam. It was here. And, says the Mishnah Berurah, v'loy nasa b'maisa. Nobody did a maisa with this esrog. It's just that it was here, and now time passed, and now it's Yom Chi. It's not Yom Shmini anymore. So now it automatically became mutter ba'achila. That's not a Hachana d'Rabbah problem, according to the first opinion. But now, if we go back to the Mechaber, second line down, last word, v'yesh oisrem b'chal liyos be'echad b'Shabbos. However, there are those that disagree with this. Mishnah Berurah is cut vav. V'yesh oisrem, why svira lahu they hold the gamba zeh shayach hachana, that yes, there is a problem of hachana here. Kevachaya aser b'yoymai, since lamaisa it was aser on Shmini Atzeres of Shabbos, and now it became mutter. That's a hachana issue. V'ayim bel Yerabah shekasav d'le'es atzarech yesh lahakol. The El Yerabah says, if there's a tzarich, you could be mekel, sharoiv paiskim hitiru, because most paiskim go with the first opinion. Siv Beis. Hifrish shiva esroigim l'shiva yomim. Let's say, before Yom Tov, you set aside 7 esroigim. One for each day of Yom Tov. So now, were you maktzeh this esrog for the entire Yom Tov? No. You set aside 7 esrogim for 7 different days. Says the Mechaber, Kol echad yoytze bay v'oich le'lamachar. Each esrog, you take an esrog, you pick it for the first day, you yoytze the mitzvah with it for the first day, and then at night, it goes ahead and it becomes mutter ba'achila, because it's no longer huktzal mitzvasai. Tomorrow, you already know that you're going to use a different esrog tomorrow. Aval b'yoymai aser, but on the day that you use it, it is aser shehuktzal l'chol hayom, because for that day, it's muktzah for the entire day. Says the Mishnah Berurah, cut zayin lamachar lav dafka tomorrow, the word lamachar means tomorrow, it becomes mutter tomorrow. Kalechad yoytze boy v'aychlo lamachar. Says the Mishnah lav dafka lamachar. V'uadin balayla mutter. It already becomes mutter by night. We could question what the halacha is during Ben Hashmashas. Okay, that does Siman Tafresh Samach Hey. Now we go on to Siman Tafresh Samach Vav. Dinei Sukkah Bayom Hashvi, the halachas of the Sukkah on Hoshana Rabbah on the 7th day of Yom Tov, Ubay Sif Echad, and here we have one Sif. One long Sif. That's this entire Siman. Says the Mechaber Sif Aleph. You come home after your long davening and Hashanah and everything else on Hoshana Rabbah morning, and you go and you sit down and you eat a lovely breakfast or a lovely lunch, and you're finished. Lo yistar sukkasai. Do not take down your sukkah. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut in Aleph, Lo yistar sukkasai. Do not take down your sukkah. The hakalayim chavasai lishan ulishan ein sham. Because you still have a chiyuv of sukkah for the entire day of Hoshana Rabbah. You want to take a nap? You got to take a nap in the sukkah. You want to sit down to learn the daf? You got to sit down and learn in the sukkah. You want to sit down and eat another sudas kfa at some point later in the day. You're going to have to eat in the sukkah. So don't run to take down your sukkah. If you're going to want to eat another suda, you're going to have to eat in the sukkah. So don't go home after Hoshana Rabbah davening in the morning, eat breakfast, and then take your sukkah down. That's the first thing the Mechaber said. Continues the Mechaber. But you could start emptying out the kalim from the sukkah. You want to bring in your table and your chairs and everything else because you have to set up your dining room. You could take the kalim out of the sukkah when? From the zman of mincha ketana. Mincha Ketana is 2.5 hours, 2.5 shoyz zmaniyos, seasonal hours. 2.5 shoyz zmaniyos before Shkia is the zman of Mincha Ketana. So once you hit the zman of Mincha Ketana, then you can already start emptying out your sukkah, u'misakein es habayis, and you could prepare the house l'chvoid Yom Tov ha'achron, l'chvoid Yom Tov of Shmini Atzeres. If it's already after Mincha Ketana, now it's already Minkara Milsa. Now it's already recognizable that the actions that you are taking are preparation for Shmini Atzeres. So now already it makes sense to start taking apart the sukkah. Eis Katan Beis in the Mishnah Berurah Min HaMincha says the Mishnah Berurah Min HaMincha means Mincha Ketana. Brings that down from the Ritva. Continues the Mechaber. Second line down in Siman Tafresh Samach Vav by the Eis Katan Gimel for the Mishnah Berurah. Let's say you have an interesting case. For some reason, you don't have a place in your house to eat on Shmini Atzeres. That's what it means over here. You don't have a place in the house to bring in your kalim from the sukkah where you can eat on Shmini Atzeres. And therefore, you actually want to eat in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres. Now, realize that right now the Mechaber is talking from the perspective of Eretz Yisrael. Right now the Mechaber is talking without the question of Sveika D'Yom, there's no Yom Tov Sheni Shel Goliath. Shmini Atzeres is Shmini Atzeres. So, the case of the Mechaber is, Sukkah is over. Hoshana Rabbah is over. Now, really, you should empty out the sukkah, you should bring everything into the house, you should prepare the house, and for the night Suda of Shmini Atzeres, you should be eating in the house. But you have an issue. You don't have any place to eat in the house. So you want to eat in the sukkah. What do you do? Says the Mechaber, Tzarich livchais ba mikaim arba al arba. You have to break open a Daled Amos by Daled Amos area of the schach. Now, obviously, you have to do this before Shkia. You can't allow how to do this on Yom Tov. It would be stira, right? So you have to do it while it's still a Hoshana Rabbah. So you're going to do this close to Shkia, Shmini Atzeres by night. You have to bust open your schach and open up an area that's Daled Amos by Daled Amos. Yeah. 1 second. Yeah. I'm sorry. I caught myself. It's not Dalit Amis al Dalit Amis. The Mechaber says Arba al Arba. Arba al Arba would be Amos. Arba al Arba is Tfachim. So, Baruch Hashem, I caught myself. Okay. So, if you don't have a place to eat in the house and you want to eat in the sukkah, says the Mechaber Tzarech Livchais Ba Mekayim Arba al Arba. You have to open up an area of the schach that's 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, which is a makom chashuv. Why do you have to do this? La'asais heker shehu yoshev ba shaloi l'shem mitzvah sukkah. We want you to make it obvious that you're not eating in the sukkah l'shem mitzvah sukkah. Now, if you go and you bust open a dalut tfachim al dalut tfachim area of the schach, you're messing up the sukkah. You're making it a puzzle of sukkah. So now you're making it obvious that you're not eating in the sukkah l'shem sukkah. Now, why is this? Why do you need to do this? Says the Mechaber, Shalo yehe nireh kemoisif. So it should not appear to be an issue of Baal Tosif. So again, the case over here was, we're talking again from the perspective of Eretz Yisrael. Sukkot is over. Hoshana Rabbah is over. Really, Shmini Atzeres by night, you should move back into the house. You have an issue, you can't move back into the house because you don't have a place to eat in the house. So you want to eat in the sukkah. Says the Mechaber, to eat in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres, it looks like Baal Tosif. Now the Mishnah Berurah is going to say, it really isn't Baal Tosif. Why isn't it Baal Tosif? The reason it's not Baal Tosif is because Shmini Atzeres is after the Siman of the mitzvah of sukkah. It's Shmini Atzeres. There's no mitzvah of sukkah on Shmini Atzeres. So it's after the Zman HaMitzvah. After the Zman HaMitzvah, you could only be over on Baal Tosif if you mamish have das that you're doing it l'shem mitzvah. Now that's not your das. You're not doing it l'shem mitzvah. You're doing it because you don't have a place to eat in the house. So it's not real Baal Tosif, but it's nireh k'Baal Tosif. It looks like Baal Tosif. And since it looks like Baal Tosif, we want you to open up an area of the schach that's dalut tvachim al dalut tvachim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, ois katan gimel. V'emein loy lefanis. You didn't have a place to bring your kalim in from the sukkah to the house. Ritzayna Lamar, what the Mechaber wants to say is, she'ein loy makam achalecha. You simply don't have another place to eat. V'tzarech lechel b'yom tov ha'achron b'sukkah. And therefore, on Shmini Atzeres, you have no choice. You can eat in the sukkah. Al kol panim tzarech livchais ba. That's why the Mechaber says you have to open up an area of the schach daled al daled. The nireh, and it would seem, says the Chavetz Chaim, tahainu kaid b'shkiyas achama, that you certainly have to do this before nightfall of Shmini Atzeres. The penyas damaloi, and what he means is tahainu kaid b'shkiyas achama. You have to do it before shkia, because you can't do it after shkia. After shkia, it's yom tov, and it would be stira. It would be seiser. It would be an issa malacha. But you also can't do it early in the day, because like the Mechaber said earlier, that on Hoshana Rabbah, when you finish eating, you don't take apart your sukkah, you still might need it. So that's what the Mishnah Berurah says here. Near it would seem that when the Mechaber says that you should open up an area of the schach daled al daled, v'neir dahainu kaid b'shkiyas achama, he means right before shkiyas achama. Because you can't do it early in the day. Maybe you'll still need the sukkah on Hoshana Rabbah, and you can't do it after Geshkia, then it's ready yom tov. Shmini Atzeres would be seiser. How large an area of the schach do you have to open? Arba al arba, a 4 tefach by 4 tefach area. Now the Mishnah Berurah brings up an interesting question. If you hearken back to the days when we were learning Hilchos Sukkah, we had 2 different shiurim. There's avir, open space in the schach is capable of passing a sukkah if you have 3 tfachim of avir. Now that's talking about a sukkah that's exactly the exact minimum size, and it only has 3 walls, and you have avir of 3 tfachim open in the middle so that it breaks the sukkah in 2. That passes both sides of the sukkah. So the point is that airspace of gimel tfachim in the schach breaks the schach. It creates a discontinuity in the schach. That's the din of airspace. Schach posel, you need a larger area. You need daled al daled. But airspace is gimel al gimel. So, frek the Chavetz Chaim, I don't understand. Why does the Mechaber say that in order to make a heker that you're not eating in the sukkah, l'shem sukkah, you have to open up an area of airspace of daled al daled? It should be an airspace of Gimel al Gimel, not Dalet al Dalet. So explains the Mishnah Berurah, Ta'af al gav ta'avir paisel b'shloisha tvachim, even though open airspace in the schach could become problematic already at 3 tvachim, mikamokim in a heker kolkach. 3 tvachim of airspace, what we're after over here is not the halachas of sukkah to passel the sukkah. What we're after here is to make a heker, to make it recognizable. Says the Chavetz Chaim, mikamokim in a heker kolkach. 3 tvachim doesn't make a heker. In order to make a heker, you need a makom chashiv. A makom chashiv is always daled al daled. Ice cut nehei. The Mechaber says the reason you have to do this is because otherwise nireh kemoisif. It looks like a problem of Baal Tosef. Says the Mishnah Berurah, aval moisif mamish loy nikra laver lov mishal Baal Tosef. But it's not real Baal Tosef. It's only nireh. It only looks like Baal Tosef. It's nireh k'moisef, but it's not real Baal Tosef. Why? Because you're not doing it l'shem mitzvah. You're doing it because you don't have any place to eat in the house. But you're not doing it l'shem mitzvah. There's shaloi bismanoi, and since it's no longer the zman of the mitzvah, when it's not the zman of the mitzvah, by kavana lahoisef, in order to be over Baal Tosef, you would need intent to be moisef on the mitzvah. When we were discussing adding hadassim and aravas to the luv. Now we go to the Ramah, 4 lines into Siman Tafrei Samach Vav, the middle of the line. Says the Ramah, Hago. Now, how about if you want to eat in the sukkah after Yom Tov is completely over? In Eretz Yisrael on Isru Chag, the day after Shmini Atzeres. In Chutz La'aretz on the 10th day, Isru Chag, the day after Simchas Torah. You want to go eat in the sukkah. Then you don't have to do anything to the schach. Because certainly from the perspective of Eretz Yisrael, there is only a nireh kemoisif issue on Shmini Atzeres. There's no nireh kemoisif issue already after Yom Tov. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Rak b'Yom HaShmini mipnei shu samach lachag. Yom HaShmini is the day after Hoshana Rabbah in Eretz Yisrael, right? I mean, it's the day after Hoshana Rabbah in Chutz La'aretz too, but in Chutz La'aretz at least we have a sveik of the Yom. In Eretz Yisrael, it's Shmini Atzeres. It really is Shmini Atzeres. The day before really was Hoshana Rabbah, so the day before you had a chiyuv of sukkah. If on the next day you go to eat in the sukkah, there's a problem of nireh kemoisif. Now on day 9, on Isru Chag, it's not even Yom Tov anymore. There's no problem of nireh kemoisif. That's already, it's already 1 full day removed from Sukkot. You had Shmini Atzeres in the middle. So there's no nireh kemoisif problem anymore. Continues the Mechaber. Ve'emahutzrach lisoid b'sha'ar hayom. Now, so far we discussed that you shouldn't take apart the sukkah on Hoshana Rabbah after you eat, right? Because you might still need it for the rest of the day. We spoke about what happens if you have to eat in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres. Now, says the Mechaber, let's say Yitaka happens that on Hoshana Rabbah, on Yom Shvi, later in the day, you want to sit down and eat a Suda. You have to eat in the sukkah because the mitzvah of sukkah is all 7 days. Even Ben Hashmashas going into day 8. It's a Safik Daraisa. So you have to eat in the sukkah. Continues the Mechaber. In Chutz La'aretz, where we have Yom Tov Sheni Shagolius, Shetzarech Leishiv Ba Bashmini. In Chutz La'aretz, where you have to eat in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres because it's fake in the Yoma. Gamar Melechal Bayom Hashmini. So when you finish the Suda on Shmini Atzeres, Moirid Kelav Umefana Oisam Mimena. You take the Kalim out of the sukkah and you bring them in to the house. But, says the Mishnah Berurah, first, Oiskat Ches, Gamar Melechal Bayom Hashmini. What does that mean you finished to eat on Shmini Atzeres? Hainu She'ein Daitoi Oid Lechal Klal Hayoim. Meaning that you know for a fact that you're done with eating for today. Di Lavachi, if not, in Iklam Shabbos, let's say it's Shabbos, so Shmini Atzeres fell out on Shabbos, you would have to make Shalosh Shudas in the sukkah. The Kala Yom Yesh Chiyav Sukkah B'Shvus Feked the Yoma. In Chutz La'aretz, day 8, Shmini Atzeres, is just like day 7 in Eretz Yisrael. So day 8, you could only start taking apart the sukkah, moving your kalim in to the house. You can't take apart the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres. It's Yom Tov, it would be Seiser. But you can't start bringing the kalim into the house to get ready to eat in the house unless you're 100% sure you don't have to eat anymore on Yom Shmini. If you do still have to eat on Yom Shmini, you got to eat in the sukkah. I've cut test. Moirid Kalov, Hainu min Amincha Ktana Ulamayla. Remember, in Chutz La'aretz, you want to get the house ready for Simchas Torah. When could you start bringing in the tables and the chairs from the sukkah? After Mincha Ktana, 2.5 Shoyis Maniyos before Shkia. The Shmini L'bnei Chutz La'aretz, because Shmini Atzeres, for people in Chutz La'aretz, who K'ma Yom Shvi Eretz Yisrael, it's just like a Shana Rabbah in Eretz Yisrael. You treat it the same way. You got to eat in the sukkah the whole day. If you were to start bringing in the kalim from the sukkah before Mincha Ktana, it doesn't look like you're doing it l'chvay Yom Tov. It's too early. Okay, now we go back to the Mechaber. 1, 2, 3, 4 lines from the bottom, about 3/4 of the way through the line. So let's say it's Chutz La'aretz and it's Shmini Atzeres, and you want to start getting ready for Simchas Torah. You want to start getting ready for eating in the house on Simchas Torah, but you don't have a place to eat in the house on Simchas Torah. In Chutz La'aretz, if you want to eat in the sukkah on Simchas Torah, now you have a problem. You see, in Eretz Yisrael, so you ran into a problem when? On a Shana Rabbah, right? You're getting ready for Shmini Atzeres, and you don't have a place to eat in the house on Shmini Atzeres. Now, right now, when you're dealing with this issue, it's a Shana Rabbah, so it's Chol, it's a weekday. So the Mechaber said, if you're going to use the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres, so on a Shana Rabbah, late in the day, before Shkia, go break open an area of the Schach, Dalet al Dalet, to create a hecker that when you eat in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres, you're not doing it l'shem mitzvah. But in Chutz La'aretz, what do? In Chutz La'aretz, you're dealing with this issue on Shmini Atzeres. In Shmini Atzeres, you're getting ready for Simchas Torah. You don't have a place to eat in the house at Simchas Torah, so you want to eat in the sukkah on Simchas Torah. But right now, at Shmini Atzeres, it's Yom Tov. You can't break open an area of the schach, it would be Seiser. So what do you do to create a hecker that you're not eating in the sukkah l'shem mitzvah? Now, if you have a shlach, you could close the shlach. That would be an eitzah. Over here nowadays, you have a shlach, close the shlach. The Mechaber says, what do? You can't break open the schach but neshu Yom Tov, because that would be an issa malacha on Yom Tov. Umar yaseh lehekera. So what could you do to make a hecker? Says the Mechaber, he gives 2 interesting eitzes. Im haisa ketana, if it was a very small sukkah, sha'aser lahanyach bahaner b'sha'ar yabim. We learned earlier that when you have a very small sukkah, you're not allowed to bring a ner into the sukkah because there's a fear of fire. And it's going to create an issue. You're not going to want to eat in the sukkah. You're going to be afraid. So you're not allowed to bring a ner into a very small sukkah. So says the Mechaber, if it's this very small sukkah, bring in a ner. And that will show that you're not eating there l'shem mitzvah. Yani chenuba. If that eitz is not going to work for you because it's a big sukkah, and it's a sukkah that you're allowed to bring an air into, then bring in something else that you don't usually bring into a sukkah. Machnis ba kederois, bring in your pots, uka'arois, and your preparation platters, the kiyotzavahem, kalim that you don't really bring into a sukkah. Kedei lahakir shehi psula, to make a hecker. The Mechaber's words are she psula, that the sukkah is puzzle. He doesn't really mean psula. He means that this is not being done l'shem mitzvah, v'shekvar nigbara mitzvasa, and that the mitzvah is over and you're not using it for a mitzvah anymore. Says the Mishnah, Berurah is yud. If it's a sukkah tada she'asal l'niach ba'aner, kedel el b'sim tafresh lamet tesef alef ayin sham Mishnah Berurah, so is cut yud alef yani chenuba. Bring in the ner. Ainu b'prima gadim shemistapi can be yaniach ba b'shmini on ulai dafka bachi. Could you bring in the ner already on Shmini Atzeres, or maybe you have to bring it in on, or you have to wait till Simchas Torah? The Shmini savik shvi huladidan. V'chem etzadid b'sefer ma'amar Mordechai shalayachnis ba ner ka'ara b'shmini. The ulai yitzchak lechel ba v'yev shalel apostle. Amna b'piski arosh matzasi b'hedya b'shmini v'ulai kavanasi gam ke b'sev shmini. I've cut your base. Lahakabashu psula. HaMechaber nakat lashon a rif b'sach sukkah. The Mechaber took this lashon straight out of the words of the rif, and that's why he uses the word psula. Vayin Sham Baran Ramban, but the Ran and the Ramban both comment on the Rif, and they say Dana Kavana Shen of Selis Pakach. The word psula is a funny word to use. We're not passeling the sukkah by bringing in pots. We're making a heker as if we're trying to passel the sukkah, meaning that we're not eating in it l'shem mitzvah. Okay? Thank you so much for joining me for Limud HaTorah. The schus of Limud HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. To Rav should say Yeshua's refuahs parnasim sheduchim to all those in need, and we should be zeicher to see the BS Gal Tzedek, but Meher V'Yameinu Amen. Be well.